Hello, my name's Ian Glover and I'm President of CREST. As I'm sure a lot of you know, we've been working extremely hard to ensure that our industry, and particularly our specialisation, is both open and inclusive to a widest range of people we can possibly do. We've run a number of workshops already looking at neurodiversity, looking at gender diversity, and to ensure that we've actually got action plans in place to move that whole debate forward and to make sure we've got actions in place that we hope will improve the current position in terms of where we are in terms of all forms of diversity. The reports we've produced, I think, have been very good, very informative, and we've used those as a basis for establishing a set of actions, particularly looking at how we can encourage, but also how we can measure performance. I think it's very important that what we need to do is to understand the position where we are now and to understand how we're actually making improvements and what's actually been effective and what isn't, so that we can ensure that we're directing our activities in terms of things that make a real positive difference. As part of that programme of activities, we have another workshop moving forward, looking at all forms of diversity, and that's going to be run on the 3rd of July. Very good, and thank you very much for IBM. It's going to be run at their conferencing centre on the South Bank. The whole purpose behind that is to have a range of different activities going on. So we have workshops again looking at gender diversity, neurodiversity, and also physical handicap. We also believe it's a very important issue looking at stress in work, and what we want to do is to make sure that there are mechanisms in place to actually support people that are struggling in particular areas. And again, what we're going to do is do rotational activities in the workshops to make sure that we're gathering all of the appropriate information. The whole purpose behind that is to make sure that the documents we have in place are fully up to date, reflect the current thinking, and also to make sure we are moving ahead with some of the things that we've been defining. It's very interesting within the CREST community because I do believe that we are already making a difference in terms of our open and inclusiveness. We have people who are taking our exams predominantly in the middle section, so somewhere between the sort of 22 and 44 range, but we've got people that are taking our examinations now who are very young. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that educational background is not a restriction, age is not a restriction in those areas. And I think it's very interesting that if you put in the hours and you actually work hard enough, then age should really not be a differentiator. We also have people on the other end of the spectrum as well, which is very good for me. So we're seeing more older people actually coming back into the industry and providing what I think is good background, good experience, and a wider business context in terms of some of the technical assessments that are being conducted. If you look at our gender diversity, I think at the bottom level, we are beginning to make a little bit of a difference. We're seeing more young ladies come through and actually do some of our examinations, but I think it's a real marketing issue for us and we've got to do more to encourage it. I think the measurements for that are very important because we need to understand whether or not we're making a difference at the top of the tree, in the middle of the tree, or at the bottom of the career stack. And I think what we need to do is to be able to measure that to make sure we're actually getting the right people in. I think if we make sure we get the right people in at the bottom, then what we've then got to do is to look at retention policies to make sure that we keep them into the industry and allow them to have a flexible working environment that allows people to actually progress through the whole of their careers in the cybersecurity industry. If you look at our ethnic background, then again, I think that's very balanced. In actual fact, because we're now a global operation and we're running examinations throughout the world, we're seeing a lot more in terms of that ethnic background and to make sure that we are again open and inclusive and we are sympathetic to some of the specific requirements that people have in those sorts of areas. And it's very important to us, I believe, to make sure that balance is reflected in what we do in terms of our examinations and the way that we support the industry. If you look at neurodiversity, then as you would expect, our neurodiversity statistics are actually very strong in terms of the types of individuals that are taking our examinations. And I think that also reflects in terms of some of the things we're seeing in terms of the numbers we're seeing of people coming through with either declared dyslexia, dyspraxia, or somewhere on the autistic spectrum. So I think in those areas we are actually making quite a big difference, and the fact that we're recording that information means we can take a much wider view in terms of open and inclusiveness. Finally, we're trying to gather more and more on educational background. It's interesting that those people that take our exams generally don't declare the educational background unless they've got degrees or master's degrees. I think that sort of hides some of the other elements underneath it. But I think what we're trying to do is to make sure that there is no restrictions. You can become a fellow of CREST without actually having any formal education at all. And we're trying to make sure that that is reflected in terms of some of the things we're seeing for the industry moving forward with things like charter status. So generally, we're trying our very best. I think as an industry, we care very much about open and inclusiveness. We're looking at it from the wider perspective of not just a particular trait or not just a particular aspect of diversity. We're looking at open and inclusiveness across all the different aspects. We really want and believe that our industry is open. We really believe that this is a fantastic industry to work in. And what we want to do is to make sure we remain open and inclusive to anybody who wants to join us, and we provide support mechanisms to allow them to progress. Thank you very much.